As a subject matter expert in crisis and somebody that's recently completed your doctorate, what was it about virtual reality and sort of what we're going to talk about in the second part of the conversation that really initially piqued your interest?
For me, virtual reality, from a training perspective, from a learning perspective, just gave me full control over this emotional aspect. So I could put people into this emotional position where I could put them into these red areas within the safety parameters, perfectly safe, where I could push people. And it was the immersive quality of virtual reality that really brought it home to me. Because very quickly, you forget where you are. Very quickly, you forget who you are. You're in a completely different world. When I first saw it, I was skeptical because I thought, well, I'm going to be I'm going to be in this spaceship. I'm an alien. I've got no legs. How on earth can this possibly? Within 2 or 3 minutes, I'd completely forgotten all about that. I was totally focused on what I was doing, and I was removed from reality. And all those factors I approached it from a experienced virtual reality, from a leadership perspective, and very quickly the crisis element came to mind. All those elements that I see, we're trying to replicate during crisis training was all there. You've got all the pressures, you've got the communication, you've got the pressure of time, you've got the pressure of quality, you've got the different voices, you've got things happening around you. But it's that immersiveness that really, really brings it home. And that was the thing that I saw, when I first started to use it, I thought that this is a whole new level. And what I really enjoyed was I could kind of isolate key elements within the experience. So I could isolate key elements like the leadership part, communication. I mentioned communication, decision-making. I could isolate them and see how people made decisions. And then from a learning perspective, if I put my training head on, I could then come back out and then kind of talk through people. And because they'd done it, because they'd immersed themselves in it, they'd faced it, it was there for everybody to see. So it just really worked. But
I want to touch on something, and forgive me for interrupting you, Dave, but there was a word you used, and it was something that resonated for me because I felt exactly the same thing. And it was this, and actually I think it's going to be something that anyone that listens to this conversation, anyone that starts considering virtual reality as a viable solution to help their business is going to be faced with. And it's that word skepticism.
Yeah.
Why, I mean, again, before you went through it, why do you think you felt such skepticism towards the idea of going into a VR environment?
I think it was because I saw it, maybe it's a little bit gimmicky. Yeah, it might be a little bit, yeah, it's a new thing, great. What I found from a learning perspective, what I found was the things I couldn't do. Suddenly I found myself in that position where I can't do this. Why can't I do this? And there's nowhere to hide. I can't admit to it. I can't deny it. It's, I've got to pick this up. I've got to pick this up. I've got to put two together, then put it in here. And I can't do it. Why can I not do it? I can't understand this. Why can I not understand? Why is all this noise happening? And suddenly I find myself thinking, wow, I am now in an area that I'm not used to being in. I'm used to being very much in control of my destiny, very much in control of what goes on around me. Suddenly I wasn't. And welcome to crisis. Suddenly you're not in control. And it's like, wow, this is quite scary. And then I felt the actual feelings. So, I went in there thinking, yeah, this will be a game and we'll play this. Very quickly, I realized that actually, all these emotions, all this learning, I'm experiencing it. my heart rate's up. I feel kind of ashamed. From a face-saving perspective, there's other senior managers around, and I'm making a complete fool of myself, potentially. Yeah. But then when we came out, you realise, actually, you didn't make a fool of yourself at all. You didn't lose face, because everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's experienced the same problems, but you're learning. So the skepticism part was, I thought it was maybe a gimmick. The reality was quite the opposite. It really did enable that experiential learning to take place. And it's those subliminal messages, those subliminal elements, such as the face saving. That, goodness me, I feel quite ashamed now that I made a mistake. I've let the team down. And I'm a little robot with two funny arms, and yet I still feel exactly that. So those emotions that we're trying to bring out in training, and I can remember, the exercise the first time I did it. I can remember it today. I can remember how I felt. I can even remember when I dropped the welding piece, and I couldn't pick it up, and I could hear the clock going down, and I can still remember how I felt at the time, thinking, "Oh, life, I might." And again, as I keep saying, from a learning perspective, leaders have to realise that they don't always have the answers, and they will make mistakes.
So just to give you and give the guys part of this context for what we're talking about, Jensen 8 have built a world first in a multiplayer, multi-environment leadership development solution called Apollo. And what you've been describing, and as you've been describing, it has made me smile, because I have the same response. I can remember 2 years ago exactly the same emotions that I felt going into that as a what I would like to say an experienced leader. I have never acknowledged some of my personal failings, and one of the things that my team will tell you is I'm pretty single-minded when it comes to certain situations, and that comes to the fore every single time that I'm involved in a particularly high pressure, client driven exercise. Now, call it a crisis, call it a project, call it whatever you might, but there are emotions that go through that make me default to type, where all of a sudden I will go into tunnel vision mode, and if people don't keep up, well, get out the way. And that's exactly the same thing that happened to me in Apollo, where all of a sudden I started to figure out what was supposed to happen, started trying to reach out, and people inevitably, like you described, were so engrossed in what they were experiencing themselves, they didn't respond. So I went back into that tunnel vision mode, and it was that moment of coming out of it for the first time and being able to have that discussion and realization of going, oh, so that's what it's like. and
I think that's a really key part when we talk about emotions, that everybody has this. When I came out, we debriefed it, because it's so different. So at first, skepticism, why am I going as an alien on a spaceship? Well, actually, the reality is that because it's totally different for everybody, everybody's on the same, nobody has an advantage. So during the debrief, suddenly everybody's, well, I felt that as well. Yeah, I did as well. Yeah, did you feel silly? God, I felt so stupid. I couldn't pick this up, I couldn't do this. And everybody's having the same emotions. And then suddenly you realise that actually it's okay to nonce. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to kind of say, I didn't want to start this until I heard somebody else had done it. But actually, I could have done it. And actually what you said, I was thinking, and I'm a little bit underconfident, and you're, at the start, you're really loud and you're talking over everybody. And yet the reality is that I did better than you. And there's so many of these human dynamics that are brought out during the whole exercise.
So there's a question I want to ask you in that space, because as somebody that's spent so many years in crisis management and transitioned from sort of the military background into the corporate sector, there is this default response to thinking that when you're training crisis management through VR and using VR environments, that you have to replicate the real environment. And I'm curious, based on what you've been describing, how you've seen and how you would see Apollo be used in that space?
Yeah, I think there's two things. The first thing is you will never replicate a crisis for real, because you will never get that emotion. You will never get that emotion. As I say, you can ring the fire bell at work and everybody can kind of remember that they're meant to, they're meant to leave their desks immediately, use the fire, but everybody finishes the phone, they finish the thing, they'll grab the quick cup of tea and they'll walk out. And you've done exactly, you've gone through your business continuity piece, you've gone through your crisis response sector, and you've done everything that you said you would do, and everybody's ticked it as great. That's not reality. The reality, and you can practice that quite easily. And you can do that in a classroom, you can do that on a piece of paper, because all you're doing is you're just going through pretty straightforward motions. The thing you can't is the emotional side. And I think the beauty of Apollo and the beauty of the virtual reality, that the whole system, is that it takes you away from reality. And I think that stepping away puts you into that emotional world. And that is then when the learning takes place. And as I said, for me, crisis is about behavior. Behavior is about human response. And the training is how people will respond to the crisis, whatever crisis that may be. With Apollo, with VR, you can bring those elements out. You can bring that in a short period of time. You can bring all those emotions out, and you can focus on key ones, but you put people into quite a heightened emotional state, and you can see people behaving as you want to see them behave in a crisis. And from a leader observing his people, you can see that, wow, this person who's the quietest person in the office, when the chips are down, he or she really comes to the front, and they are, the people to go to. Whereas this person who's the one I thought would be the go-to person, should something go wrong, it is actually kind of falls apart a little bit. And then you do the training, then you train those people and you build up the skills. But I would say it's probably essential that the scenario with Apollo is separated from a realistic scenario, purely because if it isn't, people will focus on, if it was done a fire drill, and you had a fire officer or a health and safety person there, they would focus purely on that, and they would spend all their time trying to get into their fire safety comfort zone, just to get into there. That's not what you want. That's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to stimulate that emotion. And as I say, being separate, having a different scenario really does it focuses in on that emotional state.
I remember in one of our conversations, you'd said one of the biggest aha moments for you was not actually when you were in VR, but when you were playing one of the other roles. And just for those who might not be familiar with what the caveats to this is, Apollo actually introduces you into three environments. One is the players themselves who are in the virtual world. You have your controllers who are in a control room environment, and then you have your observers. And for you, you had a number of those emotions as you went into the experience and were on the front line, as it were. But it wasn't until you switched into some of the other roles that you suddenly start seeing so many of the other synergies within crisis principles.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you say, the control room area is, for me, is probably one of the key takeaways from my background. So looking at, if you're looking to control a crisis, there are so many key elements, particularly the remoteness. Now we're all working remotely because of COVID. So just that remote working, how you deal with people, and it's simple things. People don't hear you because they're busy. People can't tell what you're saying. People are calling different items, different names. So are you talking about this? Are you talking about this? All these different elements that, I've worked in control rooms in the military for many crises and many events, and it's exactly the same. I sat there watching this, and it's exactly the same. You've got the four individuals. You can see what they're doing. You can speak to them. You can help them if you can work out how to help them. You can hear them talking. You get that full dimension, that full too much information, not giving enough information. And When you're in it, when you're operating it, yes, you're immersed in it. When you're controlling it, you are equally immersed, but at a different level. So now, from a leadership command perspective, I apart from the real thing, I've not seen anything that's replicated that to the degree that it did, because you bring in those human things. Like, I want you to do this, and you've not done it. Why did you not do it? Or why did you do this and not this when I told you to? People don't do what you say. People don't hear. People don't understand you. That's reality. And you've got to look at different ways. You've got to look at different ways of phrasing it. And then when you step outside and you debrief and you feedback and you say, well, what? You know, I told you what to do. Yeah, you said this. Yeah, I did, but I meant that. Well, you didn't say that. To do that in real life is, you know, to simulate that in a classic crisis event is very, very difficult, because people will invariably do what they say because they're not in this emotional state. You know, the clock ticking down, the clock getting louder and louder and getting faster and faster, it raises people's emotions. People start to get panicky, and that suddenly they stop listening. They focus on themselves. They forget they're part of a team and they focus on their task. That's the kind of thing that it really, really drives home.
Well, thank you for everything you shared with us, David. I really appreciate your time.